sorts of fiction, and she has little patience with a story that doesn't work. I approached the writing of this book much like a hobby, an hour here and an hour there, with a somewhat disciplined effort to write at least a page a day. I never abandoned it. I remember a 4-week period in which nothing was written. I occasionally skipped a day, but for the most part I plowed ahead with blind diligence. I thought the story was wonderful, but I wasn't sure about the writing. Renee liked it, so I kept going. After a year, I was amazed at how quickly the pages had piled up, and I realized that the book was half finished. My original goal was forgotten, and I caught myself thinking of publishing contracts and royalty statements and fancy lunches with agents and editors, the dreams of every unpublished novelist. 3 years after I started, Renee read the last chapter, and we shipped it off to New York. The working title was Death Knell, a bad idea that was scrapped as soon as the manuscript landed in the office of my new agent, Jay Guerin. Jay had seen the first 3 chapters and immediately sent me a contract of representation. 16 other agents had passed, as well as a dozen publishers. Jay took the manuscript and told me to start writing another book. I followed his advice. A year passed and nothing happened. I was deep into the writing of The Firm when Jay called in April 1988 with the wonderful news that this book would indeed be published. Bill Thompson at Winwood Press had read the manuscript and immediately bought it. Under his guidance, I worked through countless revisions and found a new title, A Time to Kill. I think it was the 6th or 7th one I decided on. I'm not good with titles. Winwood printed 5,000 copies and published the book in June 1989. It sold well within 100 miles of home, but was neglected by the rest of the world. There was no paperback deal, no foreign rights. But it was a first novel, and most of them are ignored. Better things were just around the corner. I finished The Firm in 1989 and sent it to Jay. Doubleday Dell bought it, and when it was published in hardcover in March 1991, my writing career took a dramatic turn. The success of The Firm has aroused new interest in A Time to Kill. There's a lot of autobiography in this book. I no longer practice law, but for 10 years I did so in a manner very similar to Jake Brigance. I represented people, never banks or insurance companies or big corporations. I was a street lawyer. Jake and I are the same age. I played quarterback in high school, though not very well. Much of what he says and does is what I think I would say and do under the circumstances. We both drive Saabs. We've both felt the unbearable pressure of murder trials, which is something I tried to capture in the story. We've both lost sleep over clients and vomited in courthouse restrooms. This one came from the heart. It's a first novel, and at times it rambles, but I wouldn't change a word if given the chance. Oxford, Mississippi, January 30th, 1992. Chapter 1. Billy Ray Cobb was the younger and smaller of the 2 rednecks. At 23, he was already a 3-year veteran of the state penitentiary at Parchman. Possession with intent to sell. He was a lean, tough little punk who had survived prison by somehow maintaining a ready supply of drugs that he sold and sometimes gave to the blacks and the guards for protection. In the years since his release, he had continued to prosper, and his small-time narcotics business had elevated him to the position of one of the more affluent rednecks in Ford County. He was a businessman, with employees, obligations, deals, everything but taxes. Down at the Ford place in Clanton, he was known as the last man in recent history to pay cash for a new pickup truck. $16,000 cash for a custom-built, 4-wheel drive, canary yellow, luxury Ford pickup. The fancy chrome wheels and mud-grip racing tires had been received in a business deal. The rebel flag hanging across the rear window had been stolen by Cobb from a drunken fraternity boy in an old Miss football game. The pickup was Billy Ray's most prized possession. He sat on the tailgate drinking a beer, smoking a joint, watching his friend Willard take his turn with the black girl. Willard was 4 years older and a dozen years slower. He was generally a harmless sort who had never been in serious trouble and had never been seriously employed. Maybe an occasional fight with a night in jail, but nothing that would distinguish him. He called himself a pulpwood cutter, but a bad back customarily kept him out of the woods. He had hurt his back working on an offshore rig somewhere in the Gulf, and the oil company paid him a nice settlement, which he lost when his ex-wife cleaned him out. His primary vocation was that of a part-time employee of Billy Ray Cobb, who didn't pay much but was liberal with his dope. For the first time in years, Willard could always get his hands on something.